Hidden away from the eyes of the world, deep within a nation known more for its secrets than its transparency, lies a place so brutal it makes even hardened criminals tremble. This is not just a prison, it's a living nightmare. Known as one of the worst prisons on earth, this facility has earned its reputation not through rumor, but through the horrific testimonies of former inmates, leaked footage, and rare investigative reports that managed to escape its heavily fortified walls. The prison in question is a DX Florence in Colorado, USA, or perhaps Black Dolphin Prison in Russia. Depending on who you ask, each holds a notorious title. But for this story, we'll focus on one of the most feared, Black Dolphin Prison, located near the border of Kazakhstan in the Orenburg region of Russia. Black Dolphin is no ordinary prison. It's a high-security facility reserved for the most dangerous criminals in Russia: serial killers, terrorists, cannibals, and psychopaths. Nearly all inmates here are serving life sentences without the possibility of parole. This prison is the final destination for those who have committed the most unthinkable acts. The name Black Dolphin itself comes from a disturbing symbol. Just outside the entrance, there's a statue of a black dolphin, ironically crafted by the prisoners themselves. But behind that strange monument is a fortress where daylight is rare, hope is non-existent, and survival is a daily battle. So, what makes this prison the worst in the world? It's not just the criminals inside, but how they're treated. Inmates are subjected to a strict regime designed to break their spirits and control their every move. From the moment they arrive, they are blindfolded so they can't memorize the layout of the prison. They are then bent at the waist, with arms twisted behind their backs, forced to shuffle instead of walk. Ensuring they can't see where they're going or pose a threat, prisoners here live under 24-hour surveillance. Their cells are secured behind 3 sets of steel doors, and they are never left unguarded. Even a bathroom break is a luxury. Most prisoners use a bucket inside their cells. There is no privacy, no comfort, and no connection with the outside world. Letters and visits are rare, and in many cases completely denied. The prison's extreme security measures and dehumanizing routines are intended to ensure total control. But human rights activists argue that Black Dolphin crosses the line from security to cruelty. The isolation, psychological pressure, and harsh living conditions lead many inmates to suffer mental breakdowns within months. Black Dolphin is not just a place of punishment, it's a place where time stands still, where men are stripped of their identity and reduced to mere numbers. It's this environment, void of hope, filled with fear, that has cemented its place as one of the worst prisons on earth. Daily life of the prisoners inside the cold, concrete walls of the world's worst prison. Time doesn't move with the ticking of a clock. It drags like a heavy chain. For the inmates of Black Dolphin Prison, life is reduced to a strict routine designed not just to punish, but to break the human spirit. The daily life of a prisoner here is a grim cycle of deprivation, control, and survival. Prisoners begin their day at 6 a.m., not with an alarm clock, but with the loud banging of cell doors and the shouting of guards. There's no privacy. Each cell is under constant surveillance, with guards checking on inmates every 15 minutes, day and night. The cells themselves are small, dimly lit, and freezing in the winter. Each cell contains 2 metal beds, a steel sink, and a toilet, all in the same cramped space. No windows, no natural light. Some prisoners go years without ever seeing the sun. There's no personal space, no photos, no personal belongings. Even books are limited. The harsh environment is made worse by the lack of basic hygiene. Prisoners are allowed to shower only once or twice a week, under strict supervision. Soap, clean water, and medical supplies are rationed. If a prisoner gets sick, there is no guaranteed treatment. Minor illnesses can turn deadly due to neglect. Food is minimal and monotonous. A standard meal includes thin soup, a small piece of black bread, and sometimes porridge. There are no fruits, no meat, no nutritional variety. It's enough to keep them alive, but barely. Many inmates suffer from malnutrition, tooth loss, and digestive problems. Eating in silence is mandatory, and mealtimes are brief. Talking, laughing, or even eye contact during meals can result in punishment. Perhaps the most inhumane part of life here is the complete lack of social interaction. Inmates are not allowed to speak to each other. They are isolated, even when inside a cell with another prisoner. Any attempt to communicate, even through gestures, can be seen as a breach of discipline. This psychological isolation is one of the most damaging aspects of prison life, often leading to depression, hallucinations, and suicidal thoughts. Exercise is limited to 1 hour per day in a small, cage-like enclosure. Even then, inmates are not allowed to walk freely. They are escorted, handcuffed, and bent at the waist. Guards watch closely, making sure no prisoner speaks, signals, or relaxes too much. Every movement is controlled, every breath monitored. While Black Dolphin may not be overcrowded due to its selective intake of only the most dangerous criminals, many similar prisons across the world are. In places like Venezuela's La Sabaneta or the Philippines' Quezon City Jail, cells built for 30 people may hold over 150. Prisoners sleep in shifts, standing up or lying on filthy floors. There's no clean water, no ventilation, and barely any food. Whether it's extreme control in Russia or overcrowded chaos elsewhere, the daily life of prisoners in the world's worst prisons is a brutal existence. One where dignity is stripped away and survival becomes the only goal. By prison guards and authorities. In the world's worst prisons, the guards aren't just enforcers of rules, they often become tormentors. While prisons are designed to control crime, some of the greatest horrors come not from the inmates themselves, but from the very people meant to oversee them. In places like Black Dolphin Prison in Russia, or even more chaotic systems like Venezuela's La Sabaneta or the Democratic Republic of Congo's Makala Prison, prison authorities wield unchecked power, and they often abuse it. Physical abuse is common. At Black Dolphin, prisoners are escorted everywhere while bent at a 90-degree angle, blindfolded and handcuffed behind their backs, sometimes for hours. This isn't just about security. It's a method of psychological domination. Prisoners are frequently beaten for the smallest infractions, talking without permission, looking at a guard, or failing to follow an order quickly enough. The beatings are often brutal and unreported. Medical attention is rarely provided, and any complaint can result in further punishment. In lower-funded or more corrupt prisons, the abuse is even worse. Guards may use tasers, sticks, or fists to maintain order. Torture is not just physical, it's psychological. Inmates may be kept in solitary confinement for weeks, deprived of light, sound, or any form of contact. Some are threatened with harm to their families or forced to watch others being beaten to instill fear. This constant state of terror leaves prisoners mentally broken, creating long-term trauma that can be worse than physical wounds. Corruption is another major issue. In many prisons, especially in parts of Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, power is not held by the guards alone. It is shared with the inmates who can pay. Bribes are a way of life. Want better food? Pay. Want a phone call? Pay. Want protection from violent gangs inside the prison? Pay. Those who have money or outside connections can sometimes live relatively comfortably, while those without are left to suffer in silence. In some prisons, entire sections are controlled by criminal gangs, with the guards turning a blind eye in exchange for regular payments. In such systems, the guards become businessmen, and prisoners are their customers, or their victims. They may smuggle in drugs, phones, weapons, or even women in exchange for cash. This corruption turns the prison into a dangerous marketplace of exploitation. Meanwhile, innocent or minor offenders often suffer the most. Poor inmates who can't afford bribes are treated like animals, beaten, starved, and denied basic rights. The inequality creates a twisted hierarchy within the prison system, where justice is not measured by law, but by money and connections. Power dynamics inside such prisons are completely imbalanced. Guards are not accountable to anyone. There is no real oversight, no system for complaints, and no consequences for abuse. Inmates live in constant fear, not just of each other, but of the authorities who are supposed to protect them. In the end, the prison becomes a place not of reform, but of corruption, cruelty, and survival. The very system designed to uphold justice becomes a breeding ground for injustice. Stories of prisoners inside. Behind the steel bars and stone walls of the world's worst prisons lie stories that rarely reach the outside world. Stories of pain, survival, and unimaginable injustice. These are not just tales of criminals paying for their crimes, but of human beings stripped of dignity, enduring torment in silence. One chilling example comes from Black Dolphin Prison in Russia. A former inmate, who later spoke anonymously through a human rights organization, recalled his first few days inside. After being blindfolded and dragged through a maze of corridors, he was beaten for looking up at a guard. His cellmate had been there for 15 years and had not received a single letter, visitor, or proper medical checkup. Every day they stood for hours. No chairs were allowed, and every movement was monitored. He described the mental toll of never hearing another human voice besides commands and threats. "It's like dying every day," he said. In La Sabaneta prison in Venezuela, chaos reigned. Built for 700 inmates but holding over 3,000, the prison was overrun by gangs who controlled everything, from food to weapons. A young man, arrested for stealing a motorcycle, ended up there while awaiting trial. He never made it to court. In his first week, he was stabbed during a gang fight over a meal tray. No guard intervened. He lay bleeding on the floor for hours before dying, his body later discovered by other prisoners. In La Sabaneta, the authorities had virtually given up control, letting criminals police themselves, resulting in lawlessness and death. In Camp 22, a North Korean political prison camp, survivors recount horror that sounds almost too brutal to believe. A woman who escaped and later testified at the United Nations said she witnessed a mother forced to drown her own baby as punishment for speaking out. The prisoners, many held for decades for minor or fabricated political offenses, are worked to death in coal mines or fields, surviving on a few handfuls of cornmeal a day. Public executions are common. Inmates are forced to watch, as a warning. No one knows exactly how many people have died there, but estimates suggest tens of thousands. In the Democratic Republic of Congo's Makala prison, a man arrested on false charges was imprisoned for 9 years without trial. During that time, he lost over 40 pounds, suffered from untreated tuberculosis, and witnessed guards extorting sexual favors from female prisoners in exchange for food or safety. He said, "I thought I had been buried alive." Yet, amid the horror, there are rare stories of survival. A Turkish journalist, arrested for reporting against the government, spent 2 years in solitary confinement. He later wrote about how he kept himself sane by writing imaginary letters in his mind and reciting poetry to himself. He said, "They could lock up my body, but not my mind." These stories remind us that while prisons are built to hold criminals, they often become places where injustice multiplies. The suffering of inmates, especially the wrongly accused or those imprisoned under corrupt regimes, is a stain on the global conscience. The stories, conditions, and brutal realities within the world's worst prisons are not just shocking, they are a direct violation of basic human rights. Prisons are meant to serve justice, to rehabilitate the guilty, and protect society from harm. But when these institutions become places of torture, corruption, and inhumanity, they no longer serve justice, they destroy it. Across the globe, prisons like Black Dolphin in Russia, La Sabaneta in Venezuela, Camp 22 in North Korea, and others represent more than just failed systems. They reflect a deeper problem of how societies treat those they deem unworthy. These facilities operate in the shadows, beyond the reach of law, oversight, or compassion. Inmates are stripped not just of freedom, but of identity, dignity, and in many cases, hope. And when such abuse becomes routine, it raises a painful question. How civilized are we? Really? The impact on human rights is devastating. The United Nations has clearly defined the rights of prisoners, including the right to be free from torture, the right to legal representation, the right to adequate food, medical care, and humane treatment. Yet in many of the world's worst prisons, these rights are ignored, mocked, or systematically denied. Inmates are subjected to psychological torment, starvation, physical abuse, and conditions so degrading that they often amount to slow death sentences. These are not isolated cases. They are part of a larger global crisis of prison abuse. The global response, while growing in voice, has been slow in action. Organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the UN Human Rights Council have issued countless reports condemning the inhumane conditions in such prisons. They have called on governments to shut down illegal detention centers, reduce overcrowding, and train prison staff in ethical conduct. Some countries, especially in the West, have made efforts to reform their prison systems, improving healthcare, allowing inmate education, and reducing solitary confinement. But in regions plagued by authoritarianism, poverty, or corruption, these changes remain distant dreams. One of the biggest obstacles to reform is the lack of accountability. In many countries, prison abuse is hidden from the public, and whistleblowers are silenced. Investigations are rare, and even when abuses are exposed, punishment for those responsible is almost non-existent. Without transparency and international pressure, these prisons continue to function as instruments of state control, fear, and oppression. There is an urgent need for reform. Prison should not mean torture. No matter the crime, every person has the right to be treated humanely. Rehabilitation, not dehumanization, should be the goal. This includes fair trials, proper sentencing, humane living conditions, and opportunities for inmates to reform and reintegrate into society. The global community must hold abusive governments accountable, fund rehabilitation programs, and ensure that prisons never become dumping grounds for societies forgotten. In the end, how we treat our prisoners is a reflection of who we are as a society. True justice is not just about punishment, it's about upholding the dignity of every human being, even the ones who have fallen the furthest.